Welcome. So this is part two, human relationships, values, and ethics. So please subscribe and push the button to let you know when more have been posted, and tell me whether you like or dislike a given video. That would be helpful. Okay. So what are values? Values are really anything that you consider important, that identify you as a person, there are things you like and want, ideas, beliefs, characteristics, qualities, almost anything that's important to you. Values establish a relationship between you and the world around you, so you become known for the values that you have. Okay? And ideally, values are standards by which you can have a guidance for your behavior, for your judgments, for your attitudes, particularly for core values. They provide a grounding and a consistency. They help you know what to spend time and energy on, and they are relatively stable. Now, one thing I want to point out is that there's a difference between moral values, which have a right, wrong, good, bad associated with them, and non-moral values, which are more about tastes and preferences and styles and possessions. They're not connected to right or wrong. So my truck actually, is a value, but it's not a moral value. But I believe that I have a strong sense of honesty, so that's a moral value. Now, here's some interesting things about values. The total number of moral values for any given person is a relatively small number, and it's consistent across cultures. You can go anywhere in the world, and on average, you'll get the same list of core moral values. That points us in the direction of a biological origin for core moral values and not having been taught them, though having been taught them may or may not be consistent with the innate numbers of values that we see cross-culturally. Sometimes having a near-death experience or hitting bottom, or maybe having what you would call a religious experience can reorder our moral values. Let me give you an example. Your health and healthy behaviors may be on your list of core moral values. But if you get COVID-19 and end up in the hospital, then that may change your health value to may move it to a number one position. Yes? Yeah. So a shift in values in terms of their position is what happens, not the development suddenly of a core moral value that is new to you. Okay? So let's talk about what humans do, have, and favor as a way to give a larger context for values. Okay? So the first thing is that humans have a very, very lengthy, exhaustive, almost symbolic language. Words are symbols. And words are symbols to the extent that it would behoove us to have a good vocabulary to understand the symbolic meaning of the words that we choose to use, so that we are less misunderstood. Okay? Now, as a counselor, people have all different levels of language. They use them differently. And of course, cross-culturally, there are different uses of languages, particularly for people who don't have English as their primary language. It's different. So the symbolic nature is different of their language. The specific words as symbols are different. The world is primarily still male-dominated. That has to do with the idea that males are more aggressive. Virtually all, if not all, wars are started and fought by males. We might, in that vein, think it would be useful to have female heads of state who are less likely to engage in wars. Males dominate because there is a difference in male and female architecture physically, so males are likely to be bigger and stronger, and that alone has huge implications for the structures of societies. In point of fact, males are actually biologically unnecessary at this point because, except for reaching for things on the top shelves at Walmart, because I'm tall, there are enough. There's enough sperm in cryo storage to repopulate the world many, many thousands of times over. I don't say that jokingly, actually, in terms of the necessity for males. So there's a sexual dimorphism. I'm alluding to that there's a size difference. Human beings are naturally, in some ways, devoted to forming religious and supernatural belief systems. And science has no real way to investigate such things. And to the extent that religious and supernatural beliefs bring good things to an individual who believes in them, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful thing. Humans and a few other animals clearly mourn for the dead and those who have passed on, to bring an end to their lives within us, to celebrate that, to bring forth meaning in that loss, to derive some unattachment to that person. In addition, we favor and protect first those closest to us, those of our bloodline, those who we are attached to emotionally over time, and we protect out from that boundary to favor the closest social networks, that is to say, community, then city, then state, then country. There are many complications to that simplistic statement, but that's generally what humans do. We involve ourselves with decorative art and fashion and dance and music, and those are behaviors that display creativity as well as imagination. Those are two things that humans have in abundance. We also like gossip. Gossip is news, right or wrong, true or not, news that elevates the person delivering the gossip for a brief period of time. We adorn our bodies, both as expressions of creativity and imagination, but also to draw attention to ourselves. You may wonder why some people have lots and lots of tattoos, but I see tattoos as pictures, stories that are important to the person because they are symbols, those tattoos, of events and people in their lives, and they are also attention-getting. And then we love sweets. We co-evolved with plants, and our brains are set up to respond to sweets as though they were delicious, and they are, but they're not delicious in and of themselves. We have a brain that responds to them as delicious, and they are high in energy, which is the connection between our love of them and our searching for them. Of course, nowadays we don't go out in nature and look for sweet things. It would have been happenstance that we would see and taste things that we thought were sweet because they're of high energy. Now we have them, we can order them from Amazon, So we produce them now. What is the origin of our values? And they could be anything you care to name that we have connection to, that we have experience with: home, school, society, friends, culture, church, music, books, where you were born, when you were born. But the three things that are relatively new are television, which really was available then in most households by the late 60s, early 70s. And now everybody seems to have two or three in their homes, and they have essentially a TV in their hands with their phones. And the internet, available to most people around about the mid 90s and thereafter. And then social media, which is really new. That's post 2000. That's really 21st century. Now, social media did exist to some extent before then, but it really didn't kick in until phones and so forth kicked in 2003, 2004, 2005. And now the ever-present myriad of social media. Those things do affect our values. It affects the values of our children dramatically. Dramatically. What do they see? What do they hear? What's repeated? What are the themes of those repetitions? You see, very important. And are those messages consistent with parental messages and cultural messages? So there's an interplay, a dynamic interplay between all those things. So the process of socialization is the process by which we integrate ourselves into social structures by understanding the demands of those structures, the ways in which those things in our society have for our behavioral script, what is appropriate and what is not. How to access those is a learned set of behaviors. How do we make use of church? How do we make use of schools? How do we make use of the post office and on and on and on? We learn this over time by observing what happens when we do one thing or don't do one thing, or when others do some things or don't do some things. We are either punished or praised, or we watch others being punished or praised. And all of these things mix together in our process of socialization. People who can't make use of social structures, who don't understand that, or don't understand what is and what is not appropriate behaviors for various social settings, are not as well socialized. Okay? So when we come back, I'm going to ask you to do an exercise. And the exercise is to look at where you learned your values from 4 important sources. Back in a moment with part 3.